Andy Farrell said he's never seen a game like it. So 20 minutes, Tyke Byrne has his try chalked off, and then the yellow card for James Ryan for a reckless clear out. That was upgraded to red, obviously. 34 minutes, Cobus Ronick try, a yellow card for Sam Prendergast. 39 minutes, Jack Crowley, yellow card. 2 minutes into first half injury time, yellow card for Andrew Porter. South Africa awarded a penalty try. 7-19 South Africa at half time, and as I said, like the booze that time. So Ireland started the second half then with 12 players, and Paddy McCarthy also then got his yellow card in the 62nd minute.
I throw in the two non-cards as well. Like,
yeah,
I think because if we're going chronologically, I think one of the reasons there's such ire and outrage in the crowd is that to most Irish eyes anyway, it looked, and to the neutrals I've been talking to since, Sacha Feinberg-Mgomezulu should have been at least the yellow card for the head contact on Tommy O'Brien, and it was a very interesting exchange. Well, I think the pressure that's been put on the officials by South Africa has had some level of influence. I thought they were looking for reasons not to give a yellow card in that scenario. Again, not the reason South Africa lost the game, but if Ireland are playing against 14 men, when the score was at 5-0 at that point, you go to the corner against 14 men, they've lost their key decision maker in the back line, who I didn't think had a brilliant game overall, but you put, it's a different complexion on the game, so that then makes the decision to go for a red for James Ryan just smacks of inconsistency. Again, the Tommy O'Brien, when he goes high on Kane and Moody, I think is in the same conversation and probably should at least be a yellow card. He gets away with that. You could also look at in terms of inconsistency, Ireland get a penalty try South Africa get a penalty try in the last play of the game. How come there was no yellow card there? Ireland probably should have been down to 11 men at half time. Unless I'm losing count, but there's so much inconsistency in the refereeing, and I think this entire window has been a bit of a mess from an officiating point of view. But Ireland need to look internally and go, because I don't quibble with any of those decisions. Ryan was reckless. He hurled. It was the second time he'd hit a ruck with that level of venom, but he got that completely wrong. I don't think Marcus was going to affect a turnover. I don't think he was trying to make I'm sure a lot of people would argue it was a cheap shot. I think he was trying to make a physical statement. He got it completely wrong. Deserved red card. Prendergast was an accumulation penalty. The Crowley one was just silly. It was a bit of a head loss. It wasn't the only head loss in the Irish team. Porter was just got on the wrong side of Matt Carley early. The argument could be that you take him off, but you've got a very new player on the bench. Do you throw him in?
Who struggled when he came on.
And he struggled when he came on, and he got the same decision given against him. So there's no one giving out about that. And it was very hard to quibble with a lot of those penalties.
Let's go back to the Sacha Feinberg-Mgomezulu, because you asked Andy Farrell about that just in the press conference there.
I just put it to him exactly as Rod said. Did he feel, and I guess he was never going to answer it in a public sphere, but if you could get Andy Farrell off the record, you'd love to hear what he thought, because South Africa came out at the start of this week and said that they felt like they weren't being treated fairly by the match officials. Now, I think it's worth saying in that incident, you could hear on the ref mic that Matthew Carley's assistant, Carl Dixon, was the one who was really seemed to be, that was my recollection, I really seemed to be saying yellow only, and that's a conclusion they came to. And look, I agree with Rod. I don't think you could quibble with any of the Irish cards. If anything, Andrew Porter was very lucky that he wasn't yellow carded earlier. You kind of mentioned Jack Crowley's one there. I thought that was a shocker, if I'm being honest. I thought that was a killer for Ireland. I know James Ryan got the red card and it was fully deserved. Like, he really plays the game on the edge and he stepped over the edge. But Crowley, Ireland had just scored the try against a run of play, gotten themselves back into it, and all they had to do was see out the remaining minute.
And Cian Prendergast was just coming back onto the pitch as he went off, so they stayed at 13 instead of going to 14.
And he couldn't argue with it at all. It was a crazy, just lost his head for a split second, but then South Africa end up scoring, and the halftime score has a completely different complexion. And it's also worth saying that James Ryan's red card came off the back of a penalty that Sam Prendergast should have nailed. Now, I know it was a few phases later, but you got to take every single point that's on offer against the Springboks, and it was just a accumulation of really bad errors and silly decisions.
Compounding errors.
Yeah. Just to go back to what you said about Andy Farrell in the press conference, and he said he's never going to say it. Like, why not? Like, Rassie Erasmus uses the media as a weapon, as part of his coaching armoury, and it works for him. Like, he's brilliant at it, and the best coaches do. And it frustrates me that Andy Farrell is just getting ratty at journalists again today. Having been a ratty at journalists again on Thursday, instead of using these forums to apply pressure in the right way, to make sure, like, he's clearly upset with the refereeing of the scrummage. He said that pictures that they submitted to World Rugby around the scrummaging, what they think is South African illegality, from what's effectively the third choice for South African props, we should remember, were ignored, and that the perception against Andrew Porter, which has long been there, particularly with English referees, seemed to. But it was very hard for Matthew Carley to do anything other than penalise Ireland. They were crumpling under the South African pressure, and the South Africans, whatever they were getting away with, Ireland didn't problem solve that. So, I just get frustrated by the fact that the Irish management so rarely
come out and say something publicly.
Well, if you're why not? What's going to happen to you? You get a ban. Well, Rassie's got plenty of bans. It hasn't harmed them long term. You learn from these things. So I'm not saying be disrespectful, but if you've got points to make, this is a great forum to do it. It makes it more interesting, but also it's influential. It puts public pressure on. It gets fans in behind you, because he's got 40,000 odd Irish people who are howling derision today, who are ready to hear. I'm not saying you pop off at the ref, but you come up with, and maybe you do it before the game rather than after the game. But I just think that's something that frustrates me. Yeah,
I just don't see Andy Farrell ever going down that route. I just don't think it's his style at all. And
that's a weakness.
Well, you can say it's a weakness, but I don't know if we want every head coach coming out and kind of acting like Rassie was back in the Lions tour. Now I know he's kind of toed the line since then, but it was very pointed what they did earlier on this week in terms of putting up the assistant coach Stick, who clearly applied the pressure. But I think Andy Farrell's, would you guys agree, glass was certainly half full.
Definitely came out very positive,
I'm kind of surprised by that. I wonder if he's going to be delivering the same kind of messages. And look, I can understand why, in terms of they avoided a cricket score being put on them, but I think they have to be really honest about the demolition, really, that was there, particularly at the scrum. And can I just make one point though? As the scrum was being dismantled from the very first scrum, by the way, and we made this point when we were chatting last week, that Andrew Porter has a perception, rightly or wrongly, with the referees, and I wondered if it might have been a good idea to start Paddy McCarthy. Now that point is a bit redundant because Paddy McCarthy came on and really struggled as well. But as Porter was struggling, the thought occurred to me, if this, and it rarely would happen to South Africa, Rassie Erasmus would take his prop off without thinking twice. And then you look at the flip side, the flex of changing his starting props, who were demolishing the scrum at the very end of the half to win the penalty try, was peak Rassie Erasmus and peak South Africa. Just unbelievable how they did it. They changed the props, nothing else changed. Meanwhile, Andrew Porter then got binned later on. So that's the kind of ruthless streak maybe that you'd like to see a little bit more of.
I thought we were done with moral victories in Irish rugby. I'm surprised that, maybe Andy Farrell has to spin things a certain way, and he certainly, from talking, you and I have just done the mix zone, the players are coming out with the same message, that they're proud of the fight and the courage, and there was fight and courage, and there were some unbelievable plays on the line to deny tries in the second half and to keep the score, and they won the second half for whatever that means. But they won the second half while South Africa stopped taking points. They just kept scrummaging. But when you come down to the periods of the game where Ireland were 15-on-15, where Ireland were in the mix right at the start, they started quite crisply. Their attack was very good, but they had a couple of visits to the 22, and South Africa, best defence in the world, they weren't able to break it down. They came up with a couple of turnovers, one of which I thought was pretty ropey. There was definitely a hand on the ground, but you get away with that sort of stuff. But Ireland just weren't able to break them. Look at the stats. Ireland had 16.8 attacking minutes in comparison to South Africa's 14.7. That's mind-blowing. Now, South Africa had more possession and more territory, and the territory and possession stats midway through the second half were far more weighted, so that's been skewed by the last 10 minutes. But in that first half, when it was a contest, and before the scrum became the abiding thing we'll all remember from the game, Ireland had South Africa in positions where they could get on top of them, where they could score, where they could build pressure. It only would have taken 25 points to win this game of rugby. It would have taken a couple more tries than what they got. They weren't able to break them down. They weren't calm enough in possession. They didn't resource the breakdown enough. They allowed South Africa, who played very well, and like Peter Steph-Dutoy had one of his best games I've ever seen. Malcolm Marx was off the charts, World Player of the Year. We've heard subsequent to the game. But when Ireland look at themselves, they weren't good enough with 15-on-15 to break South Africa down, to take the chances that they created for themselves, and that will be a huge frustration. We had line-out wobbles, a crooked in.
73%, I think.
Yeah, and now South Africa contested really, really well, and I think you have to that is a factor, and the crooked in was a bit harsh, but it was given, and that's, you've got to be squeaky clean in that area. So, when it was 15-on-15 and the game was a contest and Ireland were in the mix, they weren't good enough, and then they started making errors. Kicks out on the full, soaking in midfield when South Africa were running at them. Players you would never expect to soak tackles were soaking tackles. South Africa winning gain line. The Valemsa try was so easy. to make it 5-0. It was such a statement. South Africa's passing was crisper. They were so good in attack. It wasn't just the blunt force trauma. It was some beautiful, beautiful attack and play. And they could have had 2 or 3 more tries, the forward pass for the second try in the first half that they could have got. Like, Ireland need to, like, they can't just be focusing on the fact that it's very hard to play when you got 12 men. Well, why did you have 12 men? That's on you. Your discipline was terrible.
Terrible.